What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the How I'm Feeling podcast. I'm your host, JDM. And today we have a very, very special guest, Isaac Gordon. Guys, Isaac Gordon is a big brother and close friend of mine who is also a CPA, tax, and accounting consultant. And I thought it'd be good to have somebody come on here that's certified, qualified, and professional to talk about your personal finances. So if you're interested in personal finance, how you can become more financially disciplined and stable, this is the podcast you need to listen to. I'm going to hand the floor off to Isaac Gordon. And we're live. Isaac, my man, what is going on, man? How you feeling today?
Feeling good. Had that good turkey yesterday. I feel tank is full right now, so my energy levels, I'm up.
Before we go any further, I just wanted to let you guys know that this podcast is sponsored by JDM Creative Visuals. JDM Creative Visuals is a modern day production company that's built to inspire, uplift, and motivate every single individual through quality and captivating content. Yes, and this is the day after Thanksgiving. I'm a little full too, Isaac. I'm not going to lie to you. I had two families, my fiance's family, and my sister and my mom. So, I had two meals to eat. That was a little, that was a little rough, man. You know what I mean? Getting them up. So thank you so much again for deciding to be a guest on the How I'm Feeling podcast, man. I was really excited today because I think you're going to bring an interesting perspective about finances. And I think that that's a lot of things that no matter what people do, whether it's film, a lumberjack, it doesn't matter. Money comes in and money goes out, and controlling that is really good for you as a business owner and for you as a person. You know what I mean?
Right. Definitely.
Okay, all right, so we're just gonna hop right in. I kind of formatted yours a little bit differently because we are talking about finance, and money is such a intricate thing, and I really do feel like it's not like film or these things where you can learn on YouTube and these things. And so before we get into the nitty gritty of things, I want you to talk about your background in finance so that when you say the things that you do, people understand that you're coming from a very educational background.
Sure, yeah. For me, man, it's been a slow journey through kind of the education process. I grew up in a household, two parents are both, certified public accountants, CPAs, and both of them have master's degrees. So without realizing it, the bar was already kind of set before I even really started my journey. I went to college. I really didn't actually understand what my parents did in terms of what they actually did with their CPAs. It's a very broad field, handling money, handling finances. So I got to college, I actually went into more of a finance role, more of kind of the stock market, things like that. So my undergraduate degree was in finance. So I spent my time basically studying all things related to the spreadsheets and all things related to more of what you would call not necessarily on the paper. It's more stuff dealing with what can happen, trying to figure out, forecasting, different things like that. I got done with that. I went back to school, got my CPA license, took extra classes for accounting, and then carved out to go to be a CPA. So I have a very unique background in terms of being able to see things from what people usually refer to as a finance degree. We're talking about mostly stock market and things like that and working in the future. And then accounting degree, CPA, which is a lot more of the current things that are happening, looking at balance sheets, income statements, things of that sort. Kind of be able to merge the two, so to speak. So I have a very broad idea of that. And after that, I went back to school, got my master's in business management. And so that gave me an even more broad scope of just business in general, how to build businesses, how to format businesses, to help people more on the consulting side of things, to kind of bring everything together.
Okay. So, for people listening, let's just make this as simple as possible. Tell me your degrees and what they are and your certificates, and we'll move on, just so we make it clear that this is what you do and this is what you've been trained for.
Sure. So I have an undergraduate degree from University of Texas, El Paso in finance. So business was an emphasis with an emphasis in finance. Then I have my master's degree from a school in Dublin called Griffith College. That's an international business management degree. And I have my CPA license, which is from obviously California Board of Accountancy. Those are my three specific degrees.
Okay, cool. And I know you already said that before. Just if anybody was that was a clean little palette for them right there, just to say where you've been at. Any disclosures you want to offer kind of before you get into talking about finance? I know you always do that with me.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is I think finance is very personal. And I think that in this case, What I'm saying is my opinion. I think everyone grows up with a different view of money, how to do things the right way, so to speak. I don't think there is a right way. I think it's based upon everybody individually, just how they see money, how they tend to work with it. So these are just my opinions, kind of how I feel, but it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's right.
Okay, perfect, perfect. I want to get those things off the table just so people have some understanding that, you have your, degrees, your certificates, your CPA. These are still your opinions, but these are educated opinions, so you guys can take what you want from that. Uh, First, let's explain to me money, how it works, how it's printed, the cycle. Are people's money sitting in the bank? I felt like if we just touch that first before we get deeper, people actually might get some insight on actual physical money, things like that.
Right. Yeah. So money itself, prior to what we think about, we always taught in class, kind of in elementary school about money and hey, count your dollars in that and put it in the bank and everything. And we kind of all know the general flow of money. In reality, money doesn't really work that way. The Federal Reserve obviously is in charge of kind of how much money is out and not out in the system. Treasury Department kind of prints the money, so to speak. But nowadays, and my thought is that probably within 10 years, we probably won't see as much hard money anymore or coins. I think generationally now, even people who are under 30, I would say most of them are not handling on a daily basis large amounts of cash, right? They're not really seeing cash. Everything they're doing pretty much is digital at this point. It's Apple Pay, Venmo, Cash Apps, PayPal's, Zelles, whatever you want to use, credit card, debit card, but not actually going to the ATM and necessarily always getting out cash and then going to buy something. Especially now with COVID, of course, it's moved even quicker to the point where we're just so used to buying everything through a digital medium that people hardly carry cash. And when you do now, it can be inconvenient. You might find yourself going to a store trying to buy something and almost a pushback of like, well, where's your car? Can you send it to me some other way? And so I think that we're at that point now where it probably would have taken, I would say, 10 years to get to that point. But because of COVID, it's probably sped it up. We're talking maybe 5 years from now, we may not have a situation where you walk in a store and expect to use cash for anything.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I went to the store the other day and I had a 20 and they told me I couldn't use it because they had no change in the register for it. I was like, man, I've never seen a business literally turn a customer with money away because they couldn't break the bill. They told me to go down the street, find something and come back, or put the money on my card and come back, so that it's crazy.
It's crazy. The cost of cash is a lot higher now because remember, when you use cash for a business, you have to also now track that cash and account for it in a certain way that unfortunately it takes more time and more bodies to account for large amounts of cash. When it's digital, it's literally in the system, wherever they use for their accounting system or credit card payment system. And those fees for merchant accounts and things like that have obviously been reduced because of just where we are with technology. So it's just more efficient. It's less touch time. It's easier. And quite frankly, this is the part people don't understand is that they know you also spend more money when you don't use cash, right? So businesses are very smart. They know that they can get someone, if they're using a credit card or even a debit card versus cash, you're going to spend more money. They've done studies on this kind of stuff. If you walk in a store with a $100 bill, that's all you have. You're going to use $100. You're not going to go over it. That's what you're limited to, whatever's in your pocket in cash. That credit card and debit card allow you a little bit more power because you get in the store and you might see one or two things on top of what you were going in for, and you just have an extra limit. You can buy a little bit extra.
And you said the word credit card. Let's touch on this plastic that everybody loves to use: American Express, Chase Sapphire, these type of things. Why don't you talk about? We all pretty much know how credit is. You get a line of credit, you have a certain amount, and you have to pay it back. So let's go a little bit deeper. Explain to us kind of like what these agencies are banking on. Why would you give somebody money and expect them to maybe not pay you back in return? Where are they making their money and how is this working?
Yeah, they're making their money on the fact that, I think first of all, it's important to understand that as a country, America, we're built on credit, right? We ourselves as a country are in debt and we run on debt, right? We're the American dream, but we run on debt. The consumers are the same way, unfortunately. We've been kind of conditioned that debt's okay. It's okay to have it. And credit card companies are relying on the fact that you're going to go out there, you're going to spend money beyond your means, and obviously make their money on the back end in forms of credit card, interest rates and different things like that. And a lot of times you'll see a lot of promos now for 0% interest for the first year, or 0% for the first 6 months, or really low rates, and then they get you in year 2 or 3 when those rates jump up to 15%, 23%. You'll see on some cards, and then now that $1,000 you spent is a lot more than $1,000 over time if you start paying it down because you're paying those extra interest fees. So it's kind of I think credit cards are good, though. Don't get me wrong. I think it's just a matter of who should be using them and who shouldn't be using them.
Okay, and speaking of that, do you recommend the usage of credit cards? And if you do, how do you recommend that people use these things?
Yeah. So I recommend using credit cards if you already have a healthy relationship with money and you can control your spending. I think if you're anywhere near the issue of, you can't control your own budget, you just shouldn't get involved with credit cards, because it is going to be a trap that you're not going to be able to get out of, and you're going to do more damage than good. That being said, I think if you're able to use credit cards appropriately, I think it does facilitate business, and it makes it a little bit easier to do normal transactions on a routine basis. What I mean by that is, I would say two things, actually. First thing I'd say is security, right? Because we live in a day and age now where we are doing so much business on digital. The good thing about a credit card is that if there ever is credit card fraud of any sort, right? Let's say someone gets your information, they go on Amazon, make some big purchases, they go down to the store and buy some things, whatever it is. You report to their credit card company. They basically go in and say, yeah, it's fraud. Let's mark it as fraud. It takes them a week or two. They get it resolved. There's no issue. You lost no money. You lost no cash. On the flip side, if you're using a debit card or a bank card, the same thing happens. The only issue you'll have is that the money actually left the account, right? So imagine someone goes out and charges, $20,000 in your name. Well, even though you get that money back in maybe 2 weeks' time, in the meantime, that money has actually left the account. So now if you got to pay your mortgage or pay your bills, whatever it is, you've got a bit of an issue in your hands because that money's tied up somewhere else with the fraud department and the cash actually left the account. So as we go through security measures in terms of just using a credit card, I personally, if I'm shopping online or shopping somewhere, I normally will use a credit card. If I'm going to get gas, whatever it is, you see a lot of times at gas stations, they try to basically now, they kind of mimic the gas station and try to get a copy of your credit card. I much prefer to have that rest of my credit card where I can easily kind of cancel that and go to the bank and get my money and say, hey, nothing ever happened. My bank account's intact. It's on my credit card. So security isn't the first thing. The second thing I would say is that building credit is good because it makes it easier for those large asset purchases, right? It doesn't mean you can't do it without it, but it's a lot easier to go out and get that mortgage or get, if you need a line of credit for your business, whatever it is, if you have good credit, because you already basically have what is a report card saying that, hey, this guy is good for it, he's going to pay it back on time, you're not going to have any issues. You can still go out and get a house without it, but it involves what they call manual underwriting. It's a lot more intensive process. It's going to mean more money down. The interest rate's probably not going to be as favorable. So you can still do it, but it makes it easier. And the third thing I would say is probably cash flow, right? From a business standpoint, especially for those who are traveling a lot. If you're an executive, traveling 200 days plus a year, or if you're in a certain industries, if you're in the entertainment industry possibly, or an athlete or something like that, you tend to do a lot of traveling, a lot of bookings for events in advance. And usually what happens is they usually put holds on your cards, right? And it's really tough when you have a debit card because maybe traveling, you're booking travel for 3 or 4 months in advance, and they're holding your card, you don't know when it's going to hit the hold. So now that charge for $1,000, they're holding your card for $1,500 times how many events. And all of a sudden now you have your debit card you're trying to use and you can't use it because you have holds in excess of your usual amounts. Whereas a credit card doesn't really make a difference. You can use it as long as you have a good credit limit. They can put holds on there. If the flight gets canceled, they refund it. It's back to the credit card, not to your actual cash account. So it's a way to manage your cash without actually having your cash leave the account.
I've never thought of it like that, security, we talk a lot, and I never thought of that as a reason for why to use my credit card more than to use my debit card. So yeah, that was very, very super informative. Isaac, what's your approach to saving money, and just maybe like your approach? I know you said this is very individual process and very opinionated conversation. So what approach do you take to saving money?
I look at it as one. This may sound a little off, but I think everyone should look at themselves as their best investment, right? The best thing you can do is invest in yourself. So I look at saving money as me investing in myself, and so that's the one area where I think people should get selfish at and be selfish is pouring into yourself, your future, or if you have kids, your kids, your family, whatever, you have on your plate. So for me, whenever money comes into my hands, as I'm working and whatnot, my first priority is, okay, let me make sure I'm putting money aside in the different areas that are important to me, which is for me, again, I'm putting money away for my future, for my family. For me personally, I put money away for, emergency situations. I put money away for investing. And I kind of do it in an order that is very specific to my needs, so that when money comes into the account, I already have it kind of apportioned out, so to speak, with certain percentages allocated to different areas of what I'm focusing on. So that way, I'm not just sporadically getting money and deciding when I get the money, oh, I want to try this time or try that. It's already organized. I've already thought about it, a month or two in advance before I get that money, that next wave, so I know where the money is going.
And you talk about different types of funds of savings. I have a fund for you. What's the importance of having an emergency fund? I know a lot of people kind of overlook this process, and emergency fund could have been the difference whether you made it or broke it. In this first COVID period, a lot of people that didn't take these things seriously, they got caught with their hands in their pockets. So it talks to me about an emergency fund and how important these things are.
Emergency fund, I tell people, actually don't start anything else related to money until you have an emergency fund in place. Don't start investing. Don't start buying a house. Don't look for cars. Don't look to do anything until you have emergency fund. I would say for people who are, working steady jobs with, income that's very, very steady, they always say 3 to 6 months. I say always err on the side of caution. I would say 6 to 12 months. That's, again, my personal opinion. I think if you're in a volatile industry, if you're in, construction, or if you're in entertainment or one of these industries that goes in waves, I would say you need to have a year minimum and a year upwards, depending on where you are in your career. I think it just gives you ultimate flexibility to, one, be able to choose the work you want to do. So there's obviously a time when, if you're in certain industries that do fluctuate, you have to pick which project to take on and kind of the timing of those projects. When you don't have any cash reserve, you have to pick whatever is available to pay your bills, and that can be tough on a career, and not leave you fulfilled with what you like to do. And secondly, it's just peace of mind. So when something does go wrong, again, I think people sometimes don't put enough emphasis on it because they haven't actually experienced maybe a real emergency. Probably until COVID, most people never experienced a real emergency happening in their lives. But it basically allows you that grace that you don't have to worry about shuffling around and figure out what's next. You have peace of mind. I have a year in reserve. I can cover all my bills for a year. It gives you time to get on your feet. It gives you time to figure out what's next without panicking, without having to go out and get in debt, right? I don't have to go out now and go get a second mortgage or go get a line of credit or go figure out how to hustle some money and owe my neighbor or owe somebody else or my business going under, right? I can still make sure things are going to be at least solid for the next year or so while I figure out the next game plan.
And why do people fail when it comes to any type of fund or budget or even putting money aside? Where do people have like failure with that?
I think it comes from they think about money in dollars and cents and numbers and math, and money really isn't about that. As much as we spend time talking about math and making budgets and building out different spreadsheets, and they want to see what happens in 18 months, most of money is emotional. Most of money is mental, and we learn those lessons very early on. Those are things that we learn just from probably without realizing that we watch our parents, how they operate with money, how they do things in the store. We watch our grandparents, how they operate with money, watch our friends, those around us. And we pick up certain habits without realizing that by just what's happening in our communities. And we get older sometimes and we're mimicking those same things, or we have changed our habit because we don't want to do the things we saw our parents do or watch them in our community do. And that's how we learn to handle money. And what happens is there's a part where as you get older, you have to go back to the drawing board. You need to unlearn certain things, and you need to learn new things about money to really understand what is actually happening from an emotional standpoint. Because without fixing those things or addressing them, having a budget or having a security fund, whatever you want to call it, it's not going to happen. It's just not realistic to stick to it in the long run.
Hmm. And speaking of like budgets and things like that, what would you say is the proper way to start a budget if somebody were they're educational about their money, they understand that money is emotional, and they want to start some sort of budget to get themselves on track? Where's a good way and proper way to start?
Yeah. I think the first thing to do is sit down and before you even touch a number, before you even touch anything related to the math side of things, I think it's important to understand what's your goal first of all and why are you doing it, right? Because I think that if you have those two things, you have a goal and a reasoning for it, it's going to draw you to actually move forward and make the sacrifices needed to actually fulfill that budget or fulfill whatever you're working for. Without it, it's very easy to get off task. It's very easy to fall prey to that next sale that comes on Amazon, whatever it is, because you just don't have that real goal holding you down. So before you even touch, I think, a number, it's important just to go through and really sit down. If it's yourself or if you have, a partner or whatever it is, to hold you accountable. That's even more important too. If you have someone else going through it with you, to just sit down, say, this is why I'm doing it. This is why it's important to me before you even touch a number.
Hmm. And that's a tricky thing because my next question for you is how do you decide what's important for your budget and what's not? Because a lot of people might say, hey man, I need this toy. Hey man, I need this PS5. That's a necessity of my life. I need to buy, Kush every day. That's a necessity. But maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you have gas, you need to get to your job and you have to pay these things. Maybe you don't have a fully funded emergency fund, but you're not valuing these things. You're valuing the PS5. What are some things that you put as important and not important?
I think it comes down again, you establish that goal first, right? So if your goal is to be, I'm going to be a homeowner, I'm going to make sure that my family, my next generation is not going to have to do the things I had to do to get where I am. I'm going to make sure that I can retire at a certain age. Those are going to be the things that move you as you come through those tough choices, right? And I think that in terms of each person, this is very, very individual and it's very opinionated, which is why I said earlier, that's the one thing I can say is, for me personally, I'm most concerned about the next generation, right? Everything I do is about figuring out, okay, how can I, one, get to the point to where I can have flexibility and not have to work to pay my bills, but I can work because I want to do it. I'm fulfilled doing what I do. But two, most importantly, how can I make sure that I leave behind for the next generation, enough to that their path is easier and they can take it to another level. So for me, a PS5 doesn't really fall into line with what I'm trying to do for next generation. So I understand that investment in that PS5 probably isn't going to lead to where I'm trying to go right now. It's just going to be a little bit of a delay for me to get those things for another couple of years. That's just me personally, right? But I think everyone has to sit down and understand there's also a balance with the budget. People look at budget and always think of it as a bad word, as if you can't have fun. I think what you have to do is be realistic and put into your budget. You have to basically slide a little room in there for entertainment and for fun. So if your budget for entertainment, if you're able to get a PS5 within that budget, I think it's perfectly fine. I think there's nothing wrong with that. If you look down your budget and you say, I'm going to allocate every month, $200 to entertainment, and you just say, I'm going to save up for a couple of months until I can get to that PS5, I think that's perfectly fine. I think the issue is when it's not in the budget and you decide it's not going to be in the budget after the fact because you just want to get it, right? You have to be and put it in the budget as a line item. Hey, I'm going to spend $20 a month, so you want that PS5? Go get it by all means.
Hmm. Okay, and like you said the word house and home, and a lot of times we talk and you say from your experience a house is the biggest thing that the average American, or not even average nowadays, with houses at $6 million, is the average American price of the biggest thing that they'll ever purchase. How can someone start to save for a house? Give me a couple examples. The kid that's in college right now that is venturing onto a new career, what can he do? The person that's in debt, and still wants to be a homeowner. The person that has money saved, what do they do with that? So give us a little bit of different situations for how someone can start to save for a house.
For a house. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think what you said is right. I think, housing, the cost of housing is obviously one number one expenses everyone has, right? Roof over your head. And by owning a house or a condo, whatever it is, townhouse, different property, basically what you're doing is you're stabilizing your biggest cost, right? You're controlling the cost itself. And you're doing it in a way that is also an asset where you're adding value to what you do, right? Versus renting. Obviously, renting, you'd be able to pay something similar probably, but obviously at the end of the day, that money's not coming back to you ever. It's pretty much gone. I think that it is, unfortunately, it's very hard for my generation, your generation, and those after us, because just of what's happening with the whole system in college and the cost of college, it's creating this vicious cycle of people going to college, unfortunately, getting into student debt a lot of times and credit card debt while they're in college. And they're coming out of college and figuring out, oh, I want to buy a house, but I've already got debt of, $75,000 for college, another 25,000 for credit cards. Where do I even start? How can I even save for a house? I have to pay off all the student debt and my credit card debt. I'm living in my mom's basement, or I'm renting somewhere with 5 other people. I don't see how it happens. It is tough. I will say that. At the end of the day, there's only one way to do it, and that's just slow and steady. It's just slow and steady. You just chop it down one at a time. And I think the most important thing is you got to start early with doing your homework and really understanding what it is I can actually afford. What do I need to do to get myself approved to be able to buy a house? Because sometimes I think we get ourselves in a situation where it's a very big purchase, and we kind of say at the point, we're like, you know what, I'm not going to get there. I'm just going to keep renting for the next 10 years. It's not going to happen. Like, I'll wait until it's time. That's not really a good way to do it. You got to start with that 10 years earlier and just slowly build that savings over time, do your homework, get your debt down, understand what it means to go out and get approved for a loan and what you can actually buy in your area. You'd be surprised if you do enough homework, you'll find something. And once you get yourself motivated enough, you'll put away a small bit every single.
Yeah, and you said approved for a loan. That was actually my next direction. We all know, or if you don't know, to get a home, it's a large cash purchase, and a lot of people refer to a bank, whether it's Chase, Wells Fargo, whatever it is, and to get a large cash loan from them, with different terms, speculation, different interest rates and things like this. So what are some of the requirements to get approved for a loan, and what can people do to start to meet those requirements?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of, right, if you're going to go the route of doing it manually without a credit score. If you have some people come in a situation where they have a really bad credit, they necessarily can't afford to get a loan on a good interest rate. So what they'll try to do is try to basically close their credit down and go to a 0 credit score and show nothing, and then go the manual way and get a mortgage that way. The most traditional way is you go out basically. You go to the bank, whether it's your big banks you have around, your credit union, whatever it is, to help facilitate this. And they're going to do the same thing they always do. They're going to run your credit report. And they're going to say, okay, that's the first stop. What's your credit? What does it look like? What's your history? Do we even want to give you a loan, first of all? Right? It's like I said, that's your report card. Basically tells them what you've already done with other debt. That's all it tells them. So they already know, oh, car payment was missed already 10 times. Well, Mrs. Car payment 10 times. What makes you think you're going to pay the house on time? It's probably there's a good chance you're probably not, which means obviously your interest rate and your terms are not going to be favorable because they're going to make sure they tax you for it, right? It's that simple. They see you're missing your Macy's card. I mean, well, clearly you're not going to pay your house note. So it's like, that's the first step. Then they're going to look for your income. They're going to say, okay, what income does he have coming in? They're going to say, what is, let me see your W-2 or your tax returns, whatever it may be, to find out, okay, is he making money right now? What does it look like? And they're going to say, okay, well, actually, I may want to see last year's money too. Is this new money? Is this the first time you have money? I want to see his history to figure out, is it just a wave of money coming in just this year? They might even ask for something. Hey, do you have anything for next year? Do you have a contract showing you're going to definitely be employed depending on how much house you're buying, right? They're going to do an income analysis. And they're going to do in their debt the same thing. They're going to say, what debt do you have right now already? What other debt do you already have in place, right? Do you already have, 3 cars and another house we don't know about? Do you already have, a massive student loan and other things? So they're going to say, okay, what's your debt to income ratio? How much money do you really have at the end of your check to pay me, right? So after your money comes in, you already have all these other debts to pay. What else is really available for the bank? How am I going to get my money, right? Then they're probably going to go out and look and say, okay, he's got decent credit. He's got some income to show for it. His debt's not too bad. Then it becomes just a situation of, okay, either we're going to do this loan with him or we're not, or the terms may shift depending on kind of what you have going on. Obviously, there's a little bit more involved in that process. That's the major key points of it.
Hmm, hmm. Interesting. Credit is such a big part, and me myself, I've, dabbled with credit, out of college, screwed it up miserably, had to take, 3 to 4 years to get it back and get it back right. And I'm really starting to see, and I have seen that credit is just one of those things that you have to go through and you have to have a good rapport with, because if you don't, you're not going to get very far in life, and it's crazy to think, but, credit kind of runs the world. Um, do you believe in financial plans to reach goals? And so I know we covered budget. In my opinion, a budget is something that like you put on a piece of paper to kind of like, it's hard to say, but just to kind of like set these numbers and see where your money flow is going to reach something. I feel like there's always a plan that needs to be set. Like I'm not gonna go eat out, dinner 5 times a week. I'm gonna stop, smoking as much, or I'm not gonna buy tech gear, or I'm gonna spend less on Amazon. To me, a plan with these things kind of help the success of the budget. So talk to me about financial plans if they're needed to reach a goal, and what you look at them as.
I'm making sure the terminology you're using, because again, these words are sometimes interchangeable. So financial plan, you're talking about in terms of more along the lines of like investing, that type of financial plan, or more just in terms of after the budget, just in general?
I was thinking more in terms of like creating a plan so that's how you can reach your goal on your budget. So maybe a little bit early on, because you can set a budget and say, I'm going to do this and this cold turkey. But if you don't have a plan to me of how you're going to do it, like I'm going to stop some of these bad habits, it's going to be hard to reach that goal on the budget. So maybe you're kind of like a little bit ahead of me. So maybe I'm like a little bit in the beginning phase right now.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I think that comes down to so kind of like I said before. So before you do the budget, I said, basically you need to go through and first find out your emotional state with money and your goals and your whys, right? So the next step of that, before you touch a budget or the next number, I think it's figuring out what you're already doing, right? People sometimes they go and draw a budget up and it's perfect. Oh yeah, I'm gonna spend this much. I'm gonna do exactly that, and the plan works perfectly in terms of what they want to do in their goals. What they haven't done though is they haven't actually went and just watched themselves for a month or two to figure out what they're actually spending.
Hmm.
A lot of times we don't realize in our head that we're spending a lot more or a lot less than what we think we're doing. Because oh yeah, I spent about so much this month. Yeah, I only went here, I only went there. Like, no. You don't realize you actually went a couple more places. You happen to get the amnesia about the budget. So a lot of times before you even put the budget in place, you should just have a month or two where you go out and just act normal and just watch yourself. It's kind of like almost like you're policing yourself, so to speak. And you're saying, oh, wow, I didn't realize I'm spending this much at the store. Oh, I didn't realize. And then you start from there and say, oh, wow, okay. So I'm actually spending, $1,200 a month on my groceries. So for me to say the budget's only going to be 300, that's not realistic. We're not going to that's not going to happen overnight. So instead of saying 300, we're going to say, hey, how about like 750? Let's just cut it down. And you're trying to back your way into comfortable numbers, right? The worst thing you can do with the budget is to go so extreme so early because you didn't understand what you're really doing. And then the budget becomes a burden and you're not going to stick to it. It's going to feel like you're locked down. You're going to be frustrated. Like I said earlier, put some money in there for entertainment. Just not, if you're doing right now, 2,000 a month, you got to cut that down a little bit. Maybe you have to make it a little smaller, but it's still going to be within the budget. It's not a bad word though. It just means we're going to spend a little bit less.
Interesting. And Isaac, I usually ask the guest on the show, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm going to ask you a kind of a different question. Where do you see money and how money's spent in 5 years? Like, do you see cash being completely xed out of its role in the community as it is now? Like, will stores no longer accept cash and will always be the iPhone and the credit card and these things? Like, where do you see it going in the next 5 years?
So I think because of COVID, I think that's a lot more possible. I would have said 10 years probably. If you'd have asked me this pre the pandemic, I would have said probably 10 years. But because of COVID and the way businesses move, the way we all do business now, we're forced to do digitally. We're forced to do the curbside pickup for our restaurant food. We're forced to conduct business, at a distance where you can't change cash. So it's speeding up what was already done. I don't know if it'll be as fast as 5 years. I think there are still some issues in terms of just what happens with cash. What does that mean, right? I don't know if we just get away from it that quickly. But I do think we're in that 5 to 10 year window where we're going to see cash pretty much will never be obsolete because they always say cash is king, right? But in terms of actually handling physical cash, yes, right? The physical cash, even right now, we know that if we go to the banks right now, we can't all go in today and just take our money out. The system would crash. It'd be a massive, we'd have a very big problem. Banks don't actually hold physical cash of that stature in their banks and their vaults, right? But I do think that just from a conducting business standpoint, I think it's in 5 years, probably get to the point where we don't use cash. You walk into a store and everyone is used to conducting. I mean, we see all the time in Europe. You go to Europe now, I mean, if you go to the store and pull out cash, people look at you in line like, dude, what are you doing? You're going too slow. Like they're used to just pulling your debit card out, boom, touch, swipe, or Apple Pay on the vendor. Whereas in America, we've been kind of a little bit slow to do the same thing in other Asian countries. The same thing. Everything they do is on their phone. They pull their phone out, they pay for everything. Boom, boom, boom. We're out of the store. We're done. So I think in 5 years' time, it's safe to say we'll probably be digital in terms of just our normal operating. But I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with the cash reserve and how that will be handled.
Interesting. Well, I guess we'll just have to continue to live and, see where we go with this. Isaac, like, where can the people in the community find you? Where can they contact you if they have any financial questions about their taxes or making their budget or whatever it is that they need to do? Where can they reach you at?
www.gordonandassociates.biz, spelled all the way out. GORDONANDASSOCIATES.biz. They can get emails there, contact numbers there, and learn more.
Okay, perfect. Isaac, man, I appreciate you bringing your financial expertise to the podcast, man. I hope everybody was able to learn. This was a wake-up call for people that didn't have their emergency savings intact or that plan to have that cash under the mattress, get that cash out, man. We're going digital, baby.
Definitely. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate having me on. Anytime, man. Anytime.